And there was the dean as he was knocking on the door. He said, "Dean, I'm here to start classes." The dean was looking through his papers trying to find the information about Vernon Johns. He found it and he looked at it and he said, "Son, I'm sorry to tell you we cannot accept you because you do not have enough credits to go to Oberlin. Looks like your school system, you only go to school 4 months out of the year." Of course, Vernon Johns was picking cotton the rest of the months. And he says, "Well, I know you're looking for somebody with credits, but I raise the question, do you want someone with brains or do you want someone with credits?" He said, "I have the brains. I have the credits." The dean, annoyed by this person who'd been kissed by nature's son, said, "If you want to be a student here, you need to know how to read Greek fluently." Vernon Johns, with his brilliance, looked behind the dean at his bookshelf and said, "Is that not a Greek book behind you?" Pulled it off the shelf and then began to read fluently. He said again, "Do you want someone with credits or do you want someone with brains?" I've got the brains. So Vernon Johns ended up graduating the top of his class, second in his class, and then went on to Dexter Avenue Baptist Church. And there at Dexter Avenue did so many incredible things there. He was always bugging the bourgeois group at Dexter, preaching sermons that were so radical, like, "Is it legal to lynch Negroes in Alabama?" Now that's amazing because he would even preach a sermon such as "Is heaven segregated?" and would put it out on the marquee the Saturday before he preached it. As a matter of fact, the sheriff had to show up and send a deputy every Saturday night to find out when he's going to preach on Sunday morning. You got to be a bad preacher for the police to show up on Saturday to find out what you're going to preach on Sunday morning. Vernon Johns was eventually arrested one time, and there, during that arrest, they raised the question, Vernon, as they said, called him by his first name. "Tell us what you're going to preach on Sunday, this sermon on segregation." And it was Vernon Johns who pulled off his hat. He said, "Well, I'll be more than happy to tell you, but I am a Baptist preacher, so I must take an offering before we do anything." So we got out of that situation and continued to put forth this radical vision. Eventually, the deacon ministry had to get him out of there, put him out, and they said, "This will never happen again. The next time that we get somebody, they will be young and somebody we can control." One of the deacons said, "I know of a young man who just got his PhD from Boston University. I think we should call him to be pastor." They voted unanimously, and then they called Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to be their next pastor. There is always someone who builds a track to the river's edge. One could raise the question of such people as Charles Buddy Bolden, who built a track to the river's edge for those who were such names as Sidney Bechet and Miles Davis and also Wynton Marsalis. Or what of the tracks to the river's edge, such as a person by the name of Zora Neale Hurston? Before you get excited about a Toni Morrison and an Alice Walker or a Dave Smith, you need to know about the one who built a track to the river's edge. Or even what about the brilliance of someone by the name of Alain Locke of the Harlem Renaissance, who made a way for a Ralph Ellison, a Walter Mosley, and a Paul Beatty. All of these people made a track to the river's edge. Before you get excited about the brilliance of an Eddie Glaude or a Cornel West, you need to know something about David Walker's Appeal and W.E.B. Du Bois and Harold Cruz and all of those who made a track to the river's edge. And when we talk about the Atlanta student movement, you gave birth to a Van Jones and a Cory Booker and a Barack Obama, a Christine Reed, the defenders of the dream of faith, Lewis and others. You made a track to the river's edge because you were deeply committed to love and justice. There is something that's powerful because one can be committed to justice, but not to love. One can be committed to love and not to justice. That you must understand that love without justice is nothing but sentimentality. And that justice without love, in the words of my father, is naked brutality. But when love and justice merge together and walk down the aisle and consummate their relationship, they produce twins, one by the name of liberation, the other by the name of transformation. And you took that love and justice and put it together and reshaped the nation. That is what this is about. You reshaped the nation. And for those students today, as we look back on what you accomplished, you did more than complain about the situation. Because complaints do not transfer into movements. A movement is born when crisis meets conviction. The crisis met the conviction of your faith, and as a result of that, a movement was born. People who did not have any resources. Now, think about this. You were fighting against the ancestors of the Tea Party. They had resources, federal, state, and local. Here are a bunch of students from a variety of places. Some from places that don't even have names, just from counties like Troup County. They just don't even know exactly, not with the resources. They don't have the resources, but yet, with that crisis, meant conviction. And as a result of that, something unique was born. This is what we must be willing to tell our children and the next generation. That even with all of the resources that you have today, that does not start a movement. Facebook doesn't start a movement, it's nothing but a tool. Twitter does not start a movement, it's nothing but a tool. But when you have deep conviction, and when love and justice marry to each other, you then produce something else. And that is the power of this particular movement. And what is so powerful is that your proclamation of this movement was bigger than your location. You were located in Atlanta. But there were echoes and there were ripples all across the nation and now the world. So they even say now that even the Arab Spring in Egypt was connected to what you were doing in Atlanta. That young people were posting on Facebook that they heard about what students did not only in North Carolina, but also in Atlanta. What power that has. That you are the midwives of a new nonviolent revolutionary movement. And God has blessed you in so many ways, and we are thankful for what has happened. But I'm deeply sad that for this generation sometimes, and for us, we think that we did it all on our own. That there was no one ahead of us. We came up with a new idea. It was the only idea ever that there ever was. Not realizing that we stand on the shoulders of somebody else. I stand before you today because I stand on the shoulders of other people, such as you. I stand here today with a name that is connected to another name. My name is Otis Moss III. I could never say I did it by myself. I have the name of Otis Moss Jr. That he passed things down to me. But his name is Otis Moss Jr. Which means that there was somebody before him, Otis Moss Sr. Before there was an Otis Moss Sr., there was a Benjamin Mays. And before there was a Benjamin Mays, there was a John Hope. And before there was a John Hope, there was a W.E.B. Du Bois. Before there was a Du Bois, there was a Booker T. Washington. Before Washington, there was a Frederick Douglass. Before Frederick Douglass, there was a Richard Allen. Before Richard Allen, there was a John Wesley. Before John Wesley, there was a Roger Williams. Before Roger Williams, there was an Anabaptist movement. Before the Anabaptist, there was a John Calvin. Before John Calvin, there was a Martin Luther. Before Martin Luther, there was a John Wycliffe. Before John Wycliffe, there was a Thomas Aquinas. Before Thomas Aquinas, there was a St. Augustine. Before Augustine, there was a Tertullian. Before Tertullian, there was a Cyprian. Before Cyprian, there was a Paul. Before Paul, there was a Peter. Before Peter, there was Jesus. Before Jesus, there was John. Before John, there was Isaiah. Before Isaiah, there was Solomon. Before Solomon, there was David. Before David, there was Saul. Before Saul, there was Samuel. Before Samuel, there was Samson. Before Samson, there was Deborah. Before Deborah, there was Joshua. Before Joshua, there was Moses. Before Moses, there was Joseph. Before Joseph, there was Jacob. Before Jacob, there was Isaac. Before Isaac, there was Abraham. Before Abraham, there was Noah. Before Noah, there was Cain and Abel. Before Cain and Abel, there was Adam and Eve. And before Adam and Eve, there was God who was in the beginning. Someone's shoulders. It is within the Jewish tradition, as I was talking with a friend of mine by the name of Rabbi Pupko. Rabbi Pupko shared with me, he said, one of the things that within the synagogue that we teach is that history is sacred. That for a family, for a rabbi not to share history is an act against God. understand the mysterious hand of God